If you were forced to witness an innocent life being discarded like trash, would you have the courage to intervene? Prepare yourself for a deeply moving story of struggle, resilience, and the extraordinary connection between a broken soul and the unlikely hero who refused to look away. This journey will take you through moments of heartbreak and triumph that will forever change how you see the world around you. On a scorching summer afternoon in rural Tennessee, where the asphalt radiates heat like a blackened griddle, life can be as unforgiving as the elements themselves. The winding country roads connecting small towns become arteries of human indifference, places where the unwanted are sometimes abandoned to fate. But sometimes in these forgotten stretches of America, moments of cruelty give birth to unexpected miracles. Mike Rawlins never considered himself special, just a 43-year-old mechanic with calloused hands and a Harley-Davidson that offered his only real sense of freedom. His weekly rides along Route 64 were sacred, moments of solitude that helped quiet the noise in his head after losing his wife to cancer 3 years prior. The open road had become his therapy, the rumble of his engine drowning out the silence that haunted his empty home. The puppy, later to be named Phoenix, had known nothing but darkness and confinement for the first 8 weeks of his life. Born to a neglected litter in the backyard of a house where compassion was as scarce as money, the small golden retriever mix with one brown and one blue eye was considered the runt, unwanted, unsellable, and ultimately disposable. His fragile body bore the marks of neglect, his ribs visible beneath a dull coat that had never known gentle hands. That fateful Tuesday began like any other for both Mike and the nameless puppy, neither aware that their lives were about to collide in a moment that would test the limits of cruelty and kindness. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as Mike cruised along his usual route, the familiar landscape blurring at the edges of his vision while his thoughts drifted miles away from the present moment. In a rusted blue pickup truck heading in the opposite direction, a family argument reached its breaking point. "Just get rid of it," the father had shouted that morning, tired of the puppy's whimpering and the additional mouth to feed. His teenage son, hardened by years of witnessing similar moments of callousness, clutched the trembling puppy in hands that had already learned to disconnect from conscience, looking for the right moment to fulfill his father's command. The intersection of County Line Road and Route 64 would become ground zero for this story, an unremarkable stretch of highway that would forever be imprinted in Mike's memory. Traffic was sparse that day, the occasional semi-truck breaking the monotony of an otherwise empty road, allowing Mike's mind to wander to places both comforting and painful, memories of a life that seemed increasingly distant with each passing season. The puppy somehow sensed what was coming, his tiny body trembling with a primal fear as unfamiliar hands gripped him tighter. He hadn't known much kindness in his short life, but some instinct told him that whatever was about to happen represented a new threshold of danger, a moment from which there might be no return. His small heart raced against his chest like a trapped bird. From a quarter-mile away, Mike first noticed the blue pickup approaching. Nothing remarkable about it beyond the trail of black exhaust it belched into the pristine country air. Just another vehicle, another stranger passing by. The kind of mundane encounter that happens thousands of times across America's highways without consequence or memory. He adjusted his grip on the handlebars, the leather of his gloves creaking softly against chrome. In the truck, time slowed to a crawl as the teenager rolled down the window, the rushing air momentarily drowning out his father's continued complaints about money and responsibilities. The puppy squirmed in his grasp, a desperate bid for safety that only resulted in a tighter grip. "Do it now," his father barked, eyes never leaving the road ahead, as if refusing to witness would somehow absolve him of participation. What happened next would play on repeat in Mike's nightmares for months to come. A sudden movement from the passenger window of the approaching truck, a small golden shape hurled into the air, spinning grotesquely against the clear blue sky before hitting the asphalt with a sound that somehow carried over the roar of his engine. The truck accelerated away, as if speed could create distance not just from the scene, but from the act itself. Mike's world narrowed to a single point of focus, the small motionless bundle now lying on the scorching pavement 30 yards ahead. Without conscious thought, his hand clamped down on the brake lever, the back tire of his Harley fishtailing as he forced the machine to defy momentum. The scent of burning rubber filled the air as the motorcycle skidded sideways, leaving 40 feet of black marks across the highway before coming to a violent stop. The silence that followed seemed to expand around Mike as he threw his helmet aside and ran toward the small golden form. Each step felt impossibly heavy, his mind racing between hope and dread, caught in that terrible space between what he feared he would find and what he desperately wished for instead. Traffic had stopped in both directions, curious and concerned faces watching from the safety of their vehicles. Heart pounding against his ribs, Mike knelt beside the puppy, expecting the worst yet refusing to accept it. The small creature lay unnaturally still, dust and road grit covering his golden fur, one paw twisted at an angle that made Mike's stomach lurch. A lifetime of maintaining emotional distance hadn't prepared him for this moment, this fragile life discarded so callously, this innocent caught in the crossfire of human cruelty. And then, miraculously, almost imperceptibly, the puppy's side rose and fell with a shallow breath. "Hold on, little guy," Mike whispered, his voice breaking as he gently slid his hands beneath the puppy's broken body, lifting him with a tenderness that surprised even himself. "I've got you now." Blood stained his fingers as he cradled the puppy against his chest, feeling a faint heartbeat that seemed to echo his own. In that moment, something long dormant awakened in Mike, a fierce protectiveness, a determination that transcended rational thought. This puppy would not die today, not here, not like this, not while he still had breath in his body. Phoenix's life hung by the thinnest of threads as Mike carefully placed him on the passenger seat of a pickup truck belonging to Dave, a local farmer who had stopped to help. The puppy's breathing was shallow and irregular, each inhale seeming to require more effort than his tiny body could sustain. "There's a vet clinic in Oak Ridge about 15 minutes from here," Dave said. His weathered face creased with concern as Mike climbed in, still cradling the injured puppy against his chest. The drive to Oak Ridge Animal Hospital was a blur of tension and whispered prayers, Mike's rough fingers gently stroking Phoenix's matted fur. "Stay with me, buddy," he murmured, feeling each faint heartbeat like a clock counting down precious seconds. Blood seeped through Mike's shirt, the warmth of it a terrifying reminder of how precarious the situation was, how easily this small flame of life could be extinguished. Dr. Sarah Wilson was just preparing to leave for the day when Mike burst through the clinic doors, his imposing frame and leather motorcycle vest incongruous with the gentle way he held the broken puppy. "Someone threw him from a moving truck," Mike explained, his voice cracking with emotion as the veterinarian quickly led him to an examination room. "I don't know if he's going to make it, but you have to try." The examination revealed the devastating extent of Phoenix's injuries: a broken front leg, 3 fractured ribs, internal bleeding, and a severe concussion. "He's in critical condition," Dr. Wilson explained, her face grave as she prepared for emergency surgery. "I need to be honest with you. His chances aren't good and the treatment will be expensive." Without hesitation, Mike pulled out his credit card, the one he'd been saving for emergencies. "Do whatever it takes," he said firmly. "I'll find a way to pay for it." For 6 agonizing hours, Mike paced the waiting room, unable to sit still, his mind tormented by images of the small puppy flying through the air, of Phoenix's broken body on the scorching asphalt. He called his boss at the garage to explain his absence, called his neighbor to feed his cat, but mostly he just walked back and forth across the worn linoleum floor, each minute stretching into what felt like hours, his hands still stained with the puppy's blood. Dr. Wilson emerged from surgery shortly after midnight, her scrub splattered with blood, fatigue etched across her features. "He made it through the surgery," she said, offering Mike a small, cautious smile. "The next 48 hours will be critical. If he survives them, his chances improve significantly." The relief that flooded through Mike was so intense it made his knees weak, forcing him to sit down for the first time since arriving at the clinic. Phoenix's recovery room resembled an intensive care unit, the tiny puppy nearly disappearing among the tubes and monitoring equipment surrounding him. His shaved body made him look even smaller, more vulnerable. Bandages encasing his front leg and chest, an IV drip delivering fluids and pain medication to his fragile system. Mike stood at the edge of the small enclosure, tears filling his eyes as he watched the shallow rise and fall of the puppy's chest, each breath a small victory against overwhelming odds. Throughout that long night, Mike refused to leave Phoenix's side. dozing fitfully in an uncomfortable chair beside the recovery kennel, waking at every small sound or movement. "I don't understand," he confessed to Dr. Wilson during her early morning check-in. "I've never even had a dog before, never wanted one. My wife was the animal lover." He shook his head, confused by the depth of his own emotional response. "But I couldn't just leave him there to die." By the following afternoon, Phoenix opened his eyes, one brown, one blue, fixing Mike with a gaze that seemed to hold both pain and gratitude. The puppy made no sound, too weak to whimper or bark, but his tail moved slightly when Mike spoke to him, a tiny thump against the padding of his kennel. "Hey there, fighter," Mike said softly, carefully extending his fingertips through the kennel door to gently stroke the puppy's head. "You're doing great." On the third day, Phoenix attempted to stand despite his cast and bandages, only to collapse from the effort, his determination far exceeding his physical capabilities. Mike found himself both heartbroken and inspired by the puppy's resilience, by his refusal to surrender to his circumstances. "He reminds me of someone," Dr. Wilson observed quietly, watching Mike, watching Phoenix. "Someone who also knows what it means to keep going when life knocks you down." The financial reality of Phoenix's treatment hit home when Mike received the preliminary bill. Over $3,000 and climbing, with ongoing care and rehabilitation still needed. As a mechanic living to paycheck, the amount represented an impossible sum, one that would mean months of overtime and sacrificed necessities. Yet, looking at Phoenix, who'd begun to take small laps of water from a bowl held steady by a veterinary technician, Mike couldn't bring himself to regret his decision. Word of Phoenix's story began to spread throughout the small community of Oak Ridge, carried first by Dave the farmer, then by the clinic staff, and finally by local social media. Biker Mike and the miracle puppy, people called them, sharing photos of the tough-looking mechanic, tenderly feeding the recovering golden retriever with a syringe. The contrast between Mike's intimidating appearance and his gentle care for the abandoned puppy struck a chord that resonated far beyond what anyone could have anticipated. On the fifth day, when Phoenix was stable enough to be discharged with ongoing care instructions, Mike faced a decision he hadn't fully considered in the rush of emergency and surgery. "I live alone in a small apartment," he explained hesitantly to Dr. Wilson. "I work long hours at the garage. I don't know the first thing about caring for a puppy, especially one with special needs." He looked down at Phoenix, who was nestled in a blanket on his lap, looking up at him with complete trust. "But I can't abandon him now, not after everything," Dr. Wilson smiled, understanding the conflict Mike was experiencing. "Taking him home will be challenging," she acknowledged, handing Mike a detailed care plan, medication schedule, and information about puppy nutrition. "He'll need frequent feedings, medication management, and eventually physical therapy for his leg. It's a big commitment, especially for someone who's never had a pet before." Her expression softened as she watched Phoenix nuzzle against Mike's calloused hand. "But I think you two found each other for a reason." As Mike carefully placed Phoenix in a makeshift bed on the passenger seat of his friend's borrowed car, the motorcycle temporarily abandoned, the magnitude of the responsibility he'd taken on settled over him like a weighted blanket. He was now solely responsible for this vulnerable creature's survival and recovery, for transforming the act of random cruelty that had brought them together into a story of healing and redemption. "Let's go home, Phoenix," he said softly, glancing at the drowsy puppy before starting the engine. "Whatever that looks like for us now." Mike's small one-bedroom apartment had never felt so inadequate as it did when he carried Phoenix through the door for the first time. The sparse bachelor furnishings, a worn leather couch, a cluttered coffee table, mismatched kitchen items, seemed suddenly inhospitable through the lens of the puppy's needs. With careful movements, Mike arranged a soft nest of blankets in a large cardboard box beside his bed, creating a makeshift recovery space where Phoenix could rest safely while remaining within arm's reach. The first night at home was a brutal test of Mike's commitment, with Phoenix waking every 2 hours in pain and confusion, whimpering softly in the darkness. Each time Mike would turn on the bedside lamp, administer the prescribed pain medication with shaking hands, and gently stroke the puppy's head until he drifted back to sleep. By morning, Mike's eyes were red-rimmed from exhaustion, but the protective feeling in his chest had only grown stronger, more resolute. Phoenix's medication schedule became the organizing principle around which Mike restructured his entire life, setting alarms on his phone to ensure doses were never missed, even if it meant stepping away from repair jobs at crucial moments. His boss, a gruff man named Tony who rarely showed emotion, surprised Mike by rearranging the work schedule to accommodate Phoenix's needs. "Family comes first," Tony said simply, clapping Mike on the shoulder. "And that pup's family now, isn't he?" With each passing day, Phoenix's physical condition improved incrementally, his appetite returning, his eyes brightening, his broken body slowly healing under Mike's diligent care. But it was the puppy's emotional recovery that truly astonished everyone who witnessed it. The way Phoenix's trust developed, despite the cruelty he had experienced at human hands. When Mike entered the room, Phoenix's tail would thump against his blankets, his mismatched eyes following his rescuer's movements with unmistakable devotion. 2 weeks into their new life together, Mike arrived home from work to find Phoenix had somehow managed to climb out of his recovery box for the first time. The puppy had dragged himself across the bedroom floor, leaving a trail of disturbed carpet fibers to reach Mike's discarded work shirt from the previous day. There Mike found him, curled up on the oil-stained fabric, the shirt bunched beneath his small body as if it were the most comfortable bed imaginable, his nose pressed against the fabric that carried Mike's scent. The turning point came unexpectedly on a rainy Tuesday evening, when a leak in the apartment ceiling sent water cascading into the living room, directly above Phoenix's newest resting spot on the couch. Before Mike could even react to the sudden downpour, the puppy let out a terrified yelp, struggling desperately to escape the water on his still healing leg. The sound, the first real bark Phoenix had managed since his rescue, pierced Mike's heart like a physical pain, triggering memories of his own trauma, his own feelings of helplessness as his wife's illness progressed. That night, after moving Phoenix to the dry bedroom and placing buckets under the leak, Mike sat beside the trembling puppy and finally allowed himself to cry for the first time since his wife's funeral. "It's just you and me now, buddy," he whispered, stroking Phoenix's ears as the puppy pressed closer against his leg, offering comfort even through his own fear. "But we're going to be okay." In that moment of shared vulnerability, something shifted between them. A recognition of kindred spirits, both survivors of life's cruelties, both seeking a path forward from pain. The following morning, Mike made 2 decisions that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of both their lives. First, he called his landlord and gave notice on his apartment, the place he'd retreated to after selling the house he'd shared with his wife, a place he'd never really considered home. Second, he contacted Dr. Wilson about a part-time reception position he'd overheard the staff discussing during one of Phoenix's follow-up appointments. "I know cars better than animals," he admitted during the impromptu interview, "but I'm a quick learner and I need more flexible hours for Phoenix's recovery." Dr. Wilson, who had witnessed Mike's dedication firsthand during Phoenix's treatment, offered him the job on the spot, with hours that would complement his work at the garage and the added benefit of staff discounts on Phoenix's ongoing medical needs. "We need more people with your kind of heart around here," she told him, pushing aside his concerns about his lack of experience. "Technical skills can be taught, but compassion like yours is innate." Mike found an affordable small house with a fenced yard just outside town, a foreclosure property that needed considerable work, but offered the space Phoenix would need once fully recovered. Each evening after his shift at the garage or the clinic, Mike would bring Phoenix to the new house, setting him on a blanket in the corner while he patched walls, replaced broken fixtures, and slowly transformed the neglected structure into something habitable. The puppy watched his every move with fascinated attention, his tail wagging whenever Mike looked his way. The first time Phoenix managed to walk across the room without stumbling, exactly 1 month after the roadside incident, Mike recorded the wobbly journey on his phone with tears streaming down his face. The determination in the small dog's expression, the way he pushed through obvious discomfort to reach Mike's outstretched hands, embodied everything about resilience that Mike was trying to relearn himself. "That's it, buddy," he encouraged softly as Phoenix collapsed into his waiting palms. "One step at a time, just like that." As Phoenix's strength returned, so too did Mike's connection to the world around him, the puppy serving as both reason and means to re-engage with life. Neighbors he'd never spoken to stopped to admire the recovering dog during their evening walks. Fellow mechanics from the garage offered to help with house repairs, and clients at the veterinary clinic shared training tips and hand-me-down puppy supplies. The circle of isolation Mike had drawn around himself since his wife's death began to dissolve, one interaction at a time. The viral social media post that changed everything was created by Jenna, a teenage volunteer at the clinic who had fallen in love with Phoenix during his rehabilitation sessions. With Mike's reluctant permission, she shared the full story of the roadside rescue, accompanied by before and after photos showing Phoenix's remarkable recovery and the unbreakable bond that had formed between the unlikely pair. From tragedy to triumph, how one moment of compassion saved 2 lives, read the headline above the post that would eventually be shared over 100,000 times. Donations began pouring in almost immediately, first from local community members, then from animal lovers across the country, and finally from several national animal welfare organizations touched by Phoenix's story. Within a week, the GoFundMe account Jenna had created had raised over $15,000, enough to cover all of Phoenix's medical expenses, with money left over to establish a fund for other animals in similar situations. Mike, overwhelmed by the generosity of strangers, found himself unexpectedly thrust into the spotlight as a reluctant hero. A representative from the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals contacted Mike about using Phoenix's story in a nationwide campaign against animal abandonment and abuse. Your split-second decision to stop that day is exactly the kind of intervention we want to encourage, the representative explained during a video call where Phoenix made a scene-stealing appearance, climbing into Mike's lap and licking his beard with enthusiastic affection. You showed that one person can make all the difference in an animal's life. The defining moment, the true turning point in their journey, came 3 months after the rescue, when Phoenix was finally strong enough to visit the local dog park. Mike watched with his heart in his throat as the once broken puppy, now growing into his paws and sporting a glossy golden coat, cautiously approached a group of playing dogs. For a moment, Phoenix hesitated, his mismatched eyes seeking Mike for reassurance. "Go ahead, buddy," Mike encouraged softly. "I'm right here." And with that confirmation, Phoenix bounded forward on his fully healed leg, joining the play with a joy so pure it brought tears to the eyes of everyone watching. 6 months after that fateful day on Route 64, Phoenix had transformed from the broken, discarded puppy on the asphalt into a vibrant, energetic young dog whose only remaining sign of trauma was a slight limp that emerged when he was particularly tired. His coat gleamed with health, his mismatched eyes sparkled with intelligence and trust, and his once skeletal frame had filled out into the sturdy build of a golden retriever mix approaching adolescence. The physical wounds had healed completely, leaving only faint scars beneath his golden fur. The psychological healing, however, continued to be a work in progress for both Phoenix and Mike. Certain triggers, the backfire of a car engine, the sight of a blue pickup truck, unexpected loud noises, could still send Phoenix into moments of trembling panic, pressing himself against Mike's leg or seeking refuge under furniture. In those moments, Mike would sit on the floor beside him, speaking in low, soothing tones, waiting patiently until the fear subsided. "It's okay to be scared sometimes," he would murmur, stroking Phoenix's ears. "The brave part is what you do next." The renovated house had become a true home for both of them, with Phoenix's toys scattered across the living room, a custom-built ramp leading to Mike's bed, where the dog now slept each night, and photographs chronicling their journey together hanging on freshly painted walls. The yard, once overgrown and neglected, had been transformed into a secure space where Phoenix could run freely, chasing squirrels and butterflies with uninhibited joy that never failed to make Mike laugh out loud, a sound his friends had almost forgotten existed. Mike continued his dual employment at both the garage and the veterinary clinic, finding unexpected fulfillment in helping other animals and their owners navigate medical crises. His natural empathy, practical problem-solving abilities, and first-hand experience with animal rehabilitation made him an invaluable addition to Dr. Wilson's team, while his mechanical skills remained as sharp as ever when he returned to Tony's garage 3 days a week. The balance between the two worlds suited him perfectly, each feeding a different part of his spirit. The ASPCA campaign featuring Phoenix's story had exceeded all expectations, raising awareness and funds for animal welfare causes nationwide. Phoenix himself had become something of a celebrity in animal rescue circles, his photogenic face and remarkable recovery inspiring donations and adoptions across the country. Mike remained uncomfortable with the attention, but recognized the positive impact their story was having, agreeing to carefully selected appearances where Phoenix could serve as a living example of resilience and second chances. Dr. Wilson suggested that Phoenix's gentle nature and intuitive connection with people in distress might make him an excellent therapy dog with proper training. "He has a gift for sensing emotional pain," she observed, after watching Phoenix deliberately position himself beside a crying child in the clinic waiting room, resting his head on the young boy's knee until the tears subsided. It's as if his own experience of suffering has given him a special sensitivity to others who are hurting. The therapy dog training program was rigorous, requiring months of sessions where Phoenix learned to remain calm in chaotic environments, to approach people with consistent gentleness, and to recognize and respond to signs of distress. Mike attended every class, marveling at the dog's intelligence and patience, how eagerly he absorbed each new lesson, how naturally he seemed to understand the importance of the work. "He was born for this," the trainer told Mike after Phoenix passed his certification test with flying colors. "Some dogs just have it in their soul." Their first official visit as a therapy team was to Oak Ridge Memorial Hospital's pediatric unit, where Phoenix padded softly from room to room, bringing moments of joy and normalcy to children fighting their own battles against illness and injury. Mike watched with pride as his once broken companion gently placed his head on the lap of a young girl recovering from surgery, her face lighting up with the first smile her parents had seen in days. In that moment, the journey from victim to healer felt complete. The local elementary school invited Mike and Phoenix to participate in their humane education program, teaching children about animal welfare, responsible pet ownership, and the importance of compassion. Each assembly would begin with Mike briefly sharing Phoenix's story, carefully edited for younger audiences, before demonstrating how completely the dog had recovered through proper care and love. The students would sit cross-legged on the gymnasium floor, mesmerized by the handsome dog with different colored eyes, who seemed to smile as he performed tricks and accepted gentle pats from small hands. 1 year to the day after the rescue, Mike received an unexpected call from the county sheriff's department. The family in the blue pickup truck had finally been identified and located through a combination of witness statements and social media tips generated by Phoenix's growing public profile. The father and son were facing animal cruelty charges, with the investigation revealing a history of similar incidents and ongoing neglect of other animals at their property. The prosecutor wanted to know if Mike would be willing to testify about what he had witnessed that day. The decision weighed heavily on Mike's mind as he sat on the porch that evening, watching Phoenix play in the yard with Luke, a three-legged rescue dog belonging to Dr. Wilson, who had become Phoenix's best friend during their frequent visits. The contrast between the broken puppy he'd cradled in blood-stained hands and the joyful dog now racing across the grass was so profound it sometimes felt like a miracle. "What do you think, buddy?" Mike asked softly as Phoenix paused his play to check in, resting his chin on Mike's knee. "Should we face them again?" In the courtroom 2 weeks later, Mike testified calmly and clearly about what he had witnessed, his voice steady as he described the moment the puppy was thrown from the vehicle and the extensive injuries that had resulted. Phoenix, now a certified therapy dog, lay quietly at his feet throughout the testimony, a living testament to both the cruelty he had endured and the complete recovery that proper care had made possible. The judge, visibly moved by both the story and the dog's presence, delivered a sentence that included jail time, significant fines, and a lifetime ban on animal ownership. Outside the courthouse, as reporters gathered to capture reactions to the verdict, Mike knelt beside Phoenix, scratching behind his ears as cameras flashed around them. "It's not about punishment," he explained, when asked how he felt about the outcome. "It's about prevention, about making sure this doesn't happen to another animal. Phoenix survived and thrived because he got lucky, because someone saw what happened and stopped to help. But there are so many others who aren't that fortunate." The Phoenix Fund, established with the excess donations from the original GoFundMe campaign, had grown into a significant resource for emergency veterinary care for abandoned and abused animals throughout the region. Administered jointly by Dr. Wilson's clinic and the local animal shelter. The fund had already helped save dozens of animals who might otherwise have been euthanized due to lack of resources for their treatment. Each success story was shared on the fund's website, creating a living legacy that extended far beyond Phoenix himself. As Phoenix approached his second birthday, the actual date unknown, so celebrated on the anniversary of his rescue, Mike reflected on the profound changes the dog had brought to his life, the renewed sense of purpose, the community connections, the daily lessons in resilience and joy that continued to heal his own grief-wounded heart. What had begun as a split-second decision on a scorching highway had blossomed into a relationship that had quite literally saved them both, transforming tragedy into purpose and isolation into belonging. If you had asked Mike Rawlins 3 years ago where he saw himself in the future, he never would have imagined this life. Standing in the sunshine of a crisp autumn morning, watching Phoenix lead a group of newly rescued dogs through basic confidence-building exercises in the large training yard behind what was now officially Phoenix's Second Chance Rescue and Rehabilitation Center. The Golden Retriever mix, now fully grown with a magnificent coat and an unmistakable air of quiet dignity, moved among the nervous rescues with intuitive gentleness, demonstrating through his own confident presence that healing was possible, that trust could be rebuilt. The center had been Mike's dream, born during those long nights of Phoenix's recovery, taking shape gradually as he witnessed firsthand how many animals needed the kind of intensive rehabilitation that traditional shelters simply couldn't provide. With the continuing support of the community, corporate sponsors touched by Phoenix's story, and a partnership with Dr. Wilson's practice, the dream had materialized into 5 acres of purpose-built facilities, dedicated to giving traumatized animals the time and specialized care they needed to become adoptable companions. Phoenix's fame had continued to grow. His story featured in national publications and television programs focused on animal welfare and the human-animal bond. While Mike still shied away from being called a hero, preferring to redirect attention to the work of the center and the resilience of the animals themselves, he had come to accept the value of their public platform in advocating for stronger animal protection laws and raising awareness about responsible pet ownership. Phoenix is the real star, he would always insist when interviewers focused too much on his role. I just did what anyone would do. But both Mike and Phoenix knew the truth that lay beneath the public narrative, how they had saved each other in ways that went far beyond that moment on the highway. The nightmares that had plagued Mike since his wife's death had gradually subsided, replaced by the comforting weight of Phoenix against his legs each night. The paralyzing grief that had isolated him from friends and family had transformed into a newfound purpose that connected him to a community of like-minded advocates. The numbness he had cultivated as protection against further pain had given way to a vulnerability that allowed him to feel joy again. On particularly difficult days, when a rescue arrived in such terrible condition that even the experienced staff at the center found themselves fighting tears, Phoenix would abandon his usual routine to plant himself firmly at Mike's side, a steady presence reminding him of what was possible, of how far they had come from their own darkest moment. "Look at where we started," Mike would whisper to himself and to Phoenix in those moments, drawing strength from the living miracle beside him. "Remember where we started, and have faith in the journey." Visitors to the center were often surprised by the profound bond between the man and dog, the way they communicated almost without words, anticipating each other's movements with an intuitive synchronicity that spoke of years of mutual trust and understanding. Children participating in the center's educational programs would listen wide-eyed as staff explained that Phoenix had once been as frightened and injured as some of the animals they were now helping, that the confident, gentle therapy dog leading them on tours had begun his journey as a discarded, broken puppy on a highway not far from where they stood. The blue pickup truck that had once featured in Mike's nightmares had long since been sold and scrapped, its former owners serving their sentences and, according to the probation officer, who occasionally updated Mike, showing signs of genuine remorse and rehabilitation. Mike had made the difficult decision to forgive, not for their benefit, but for his own and Phoenix's, a conscious choice to focus on the healing rather than the harm, on the thousands of animals they had been able to help because of what happened that day, rather than the cruelty that had brought them together. Phoenix's official role at the center, included working with the most traumatized rescues, animals so terrified of human contact that traditional rehabilitation methods failed to reach them. Somehow, perhaps through scent, perhaps through some deeper understanding born of shared experience, Phoenix could connect with these animals in ways humans couldn't, gradually showing them through his own behavior that the world could be safe again, that not all hands brought pain. That trust was possible even after the deepest betrayal. On the wall of Mike's office hung a simple framed photograph. Not one of the professional shots from magazine features or fundraising materials, but a grainy cell phone picture taken by Dave the farmer on that first frantic drive to the veterinary clinic. In it, a bloodied, barely conscious Phoenix lay cradled against Mike's chest, his tiny body nearly lost in the man's large, careful hands, both of their futures hanging in the balance of that desperate moment. Beside it hung the center's mission statement, beginning with words that never failed to remind Mike of how profoundly a single moment of compassion could change the world. Because someone stopped. As the autumn sun began to set over the rolling Tennessee hills surrounding the center, Mike called Phoenix to his side for their nightly walk along the perimeter fence, a ritual that had begun during the construction of the facility and continued as a moment of private reflection amidst their increasingly public lives. Phoenix trotted over immediately, pressing against Mike's leg in the familiar gesture that had come to mean so much to both of them. "I'm here. You're safe. We're together." Mike rested his hand on the dog's head, feeling the smooth fur beneath his fingers, the solid warmth of the living miracle that had transformed his life. "You know what, Phoenix?" Mike said softly as they walked together along the fence line, passing the newly constructed cabins where volunteers and interns lived while training in trauma-informed animal rehabilitation. "I used to think that moment on the highway was about me saving you. But the truth is, you saved me right back." Phoenix looked up at him with those remarkable mismatched eyes, one brown, one blue, that seemed to understand every word, his tail gently wagging in the quiet acknowledgement of a truth they both had lived, that sometimes the most broken among us become the most powerful healers, that suffering can become the birthplace of compassion, that what begins in tragedy can blossom into purpose. And so they continued their walk as twilight gathered around them, man and dog moving in perfect harmony across the land that had become their shared legacy. Behind them, lights came on in the rehabilitation center where dozens of animals rested safely for the night, each one a testament to the ripple effects of that single moment of intervention on a scorching highway. Before them stretched the future they had built together, rich with purpose and possibility. And between them flowed the unbreakable bond forged in that first desperate moment, a connection that had not only survived trauma, but had been strengthened by it, transformed into something rare and precious and healing. As you reflect on Phoenix's journey from discarded puppy to healing presence in countless lives, remember that acts of compassion are never wasted, even when the outcome seems uncertain. Mike Rawlins couldn't have known what would follow from his decision to slam on the brakes that summer day. Couldn't have imagined the lives that would be touched and saved because he refused to drive past suffering. He simply did what his heart demanded in that moment, extended a hand to a creature in pain, and in doing so, set in motion a transformation that reached far beyond himself or Phoenix. Perhaps there is a Phoenix waiting somewhere in your own life, a moment of choice between looking away or stopping, between indifference or action, between resignation or hope. And perhaps, like Mike, you will discover that the hand you extend in compassion ultimately becomes the same hand that pulls you toward your own healing, your own purpose, your own second chance.